When you are, fire it up. Good.
All right. I'd like to call to order the November 4th, 2019 meeting of the New Canaan Board of Education. First up is to approve our minutes from October 21st. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes? Anyone? Julie? Second? Tom? All those in favor? Great. Abstentions? Deanna? Thank you. Next is to review and approve tonight's agenda. I have a motion. Deanna, second. Penny, all those in favor? Thanks. All right, next, comments from the public. To ensure the public's right to be heard, the board has set aside time during the meeting for public comments. 2 minutes will be allotted to each speaker and a maximum of 15 minutes to each subject. I'm not seeing anyone who would like to speak.
Hi, Tom.
Hello again, Tom. Next is reports and recognition. We have the student enrollment and staff utilization report from Ms. Bianca.
Good evening, everyone.
Hello.
Good evening.
Thank you so much for the opportunity to present some important information to you about our district staffing and enrollment for this and in terms of future years. I'd like to start off by thanking Dr. Lutzy, who's been very patient with me for the last 4 months and very supportive in every way, especially in terms of some last-minute edits. So thank you so much, Dr. Lutzy. The HR staff, Lisa Abrams, and especially Lynn Reese, who played a major role in putting the majority of the reams of paper that you have in front of you and that were sent to you online together and organizing all of the information. The cabinet, Dr. Carenti, who has spent some time with me going over all the detailed information in the last several days and helping with the historical background of it. And also Dr. Keating and Bill Tesber, all of the principals and their staff members who reviewed all of their sections and made sure that they were accurate, and I didn't have to worry about that. Also to Lizette D'Amico, Alan Sneath, and Paul Gallo, who have also led in their areas in terms of checking for accuracy and making sure that we have good information. And this review couldn't have happened without all of those people's support and the work that they did together. It should also be noted that all of the documents from tonight's presentation and that you have received and are on the table will be posted to our website in the very near future. So they'll be there for the public. And we've compiled a considerable amount of data from a variety of sources in these reports. So I know that it's a lot. Please be patient. I'll try to be as quick as possible, but hopefully you will understand. So the documents that have been given to you consist of 4 specific reports. The memorandum that you see on enrollment projections analyzes all the information and the reports provided by our demographer that are based on past information, present, and some projected enrollment information for our school district. And also included in that document are the demographic charts and graphs that show our historical enrollment and our projected enrollments. The staff utilization and enrollment report, which is a lovely shade of green, not picked by me, but I do like it very much, is a comprehensive look at our certified staffing for the 2019-20 school year. And this report includes a summary of our enrollment data, some staffing data with the FTEs at all the different levels, including sections of class size for each grade, faculty leadership positions, administration, and all of the summary totals. It has a lot of uses as a source of information and serves pretty much as a standard reference throughout our school year, but especially during our budget season. Also, there's a separate staff utilization report, that's the orange one, with data on all of our non-certified staff numbers at each school. And then there's the supplemental analyses report, and that provides some additional perspectives on the data in the staff utilization and enrollment report an FTE comparison of this year with last year at each level by the departments, and a look at which classes may be under our district guidelines and which are over, and a look at enrollment and special education programming as well. So those are the documents. Because the data is presented from several different perspectives, including the different levels of the system and the grades and our core and non-core subject areas and classes and sections, it's rather voluminous. My presentation tonight will basically focus on a review of our current student enrollment, our educator staffing levels, and our demographers' projections moving forward. Hopefully, by focusing on this, you'll have a clearer snapshot of where we all are statistically as of October 1st of this year. And you'll also have some sense of where we might be headed in the future. As with any presentation, this data is, in the reports, is really detailed, as I have said, and our report today provides an overview of it. So let's start by getting a school district perspective. So we start with an enrollment snapshot of the entire district. And just as kind of a frame of reference for you all, over the last 6 years, we've increased enrollment by a total of 4 students. So in the 2014-15 school year, we had 4,168 students. And this year, we have 4,172. At our 4,172 K through 12 students, we see an increase of 59 net students over last year. Of this increase, the majority are at our elementary schools, and there are 75 more students in our kindergartens. We have 108 students more than our demographer's projection, and not included in these numbers are our pre-K numbers, which saw a slight decrease from 46 to 39. However, there are 12 students in the birth to 3 pipeline who will be entering our schools during the course of this year, which would bring that total up to 51. When we add to the K through 12 enrollment the pre-K program and students who are outplaced, we arrive at the total district enrollment, which is 4,224 students, compared to 4,170, or 54 more than last year's overall total. And in looking at our school district's historical enrollment, using our pre-K through 12 enrollment figures, this year of 4,159, 10 years ago, we were at 4,140, so 19 students of a difference. Now we can take a look at each level. In terms of the elementary, as I wrote in the memorandum of enrollment, projections overall enrollment is above the demographer's projections. This year, our kindergarten came in at 308 students, 61 over projection, as I said, and up by 75 from our previous year of 233 students. Overall, the elementary enrollment increased by 21 students. And let's now take a look at a further breakdown by the separate elementary schools. So East and South show an increase each of 19 students, and West shows 17 fewer than last year. Monitoring of the enrollment at this level is really important moving forward, as you know. We currently have 27 classrooms at East, 27 at South, and 24 sections, including the 3 sections of pre-K at West School. And we've reduced 1 section K through 4 from last year overall, going from 78 to 77 sections. In terms of the SACS enrollment, we had a decrease this year from 1,334 students to 1,327, a difference of 7 students. NESDEC projects enrollment to decrease next year to 1,319, which would be down 8 students. And the demographer projects the enrollment at SACS to decrease to 1,319 in 2021 and to 1,294 in 21-22. Even with some projected decreases, SACS will remain in the upper 1,250 range for the next 3 to 4 years.
Doris, I'm sorry. As I look at this slide, this year we were 15 students over their projection for the year? Okay.
Yes.
At 1327. Okay. Thanks.
At New Canaan High School, this year, the enrollment is 1,330 students, and it's projected to increase next year, according to our NESDEC projections, by 18 students to a total of 1,348 students. New Canaan High School's enrollment is projected to decrease to an anticipated 1,316 during the 24-25 school year. 5 years from now, a 14-student decrease. In terms of special education, our student population has increased slightly this year. That is a prevalence rate of 12.3 as compared to 11.2 last year. Our out-of-district placements are at 13 from 11 last year. And there's some more specific detailed information in the supplementary analyses of the staff utilization and enrollment report for you if you need that. In looking at enrollment and class size guidelines, this chart shows that for this year, the percentage of classes overall in the district that are at or below guidelines is very high. As shown on page 1 of your staff utilization report, the class guidelines for K through 3 classes are 16 to 20. Shown here is that on the elementary level, the percent of classes at or below guidelines is 100%. The guidelines for grades 4 through 8 are 20 to 24, and SACS typically has a small percentage of classes over guidelines, about 2%, and many sections under guidelines due to the structure of the team program, as well as some different math placements. This chart shows SACS at 98% within class size guidelines. For the high school, grades 9 through 12, the guidelines are 14 to 25 students per section, and the percentage over guidelines was 7% 2 years ago, 6% last year, and 3% this year. 97% of the classes at New Canaan High School are within class size guidelines. Overall, the percentage of classes at or below guidelines has remained well above 90% on average, and is relatively consistent over the last 5 years. We now turn to staffing. As you can see, the number of certified staff increased by 1.63 compared to last year. This is basically due, well, there's a variety of reasons. One is the addition of the preschool teacher in this budget, and the other is mostly at SACS in terms of some related area class pieces that needed to be added that were based on enrollment needs. In terms of elementary staffing, at this level, overall elementary staffing is 120.65 FTEs, down from last year's total of 121.1, and that's a net of negative 0.45. SACS staffing shows an increase of the 1.25 FTEs, and that is a combination of enrollment-based additions, mostly in the areas of FLES, world language, math, and music in small pieces. New Canaan High School staffing shows an increase of 0.43 FTEs. The addition in FTE is the result of various small changes as well across the high school staffing. In terms of special education staffing, we have a difference of an additional 0.60 FTE, and we had a preschool teacher addition that was offset by another 0.4 from a different position, which brought us to the 0.6. Now back to enrollment, and let's look at the demographer's projections for next year. The projection of the demographer estimates that the district as a whole will decrease in enrollment by 7 students, from 4,172 to 4,165. And if you look at this by level, they project a decrease of 18 students at the elementary level, and our pre-K numbers are not included in this analysis. In terms of Sacs and New Canaan High School, the demographer projects a decrease in enrollment of 8 students next year at Sacs, from 1,327 to 1,319. At the same time, they expect the high school to increase 19 students to 1,349 from 1,330 for this year. Overall, according to our demographer, we're in a period of stable but slightly decreasing enrollment at the middle and the elementary schools, as well as Sacs, with some small growth at the high school level in general. I think that we could say that this is all good information and positive in terms of our enrollment and the fact that we do have a lot of new students, which you're aware of from our budget season last year. And moving forward, the complexity of this will be with the NASDAQ projections and our best information to estimate what our enrollment will become and to plan for that accordingly. So thank you very much. And at this point, if there are any questions,
Thank you.
we are all happy to entertain them.
Penny?
Thank you for all the information. I was wondering, with respect to the getting 21 students over projection for the high school, if there was any anecdotal evidence or understanding about where those students came from. Are they private school students returning to the public school? Are they move-ins from out of state?
We've actually done, We've actually done somewhat of an analysis of move-ins, both in terms of in-state and out-of-state and out of the country. And the number of students that have moved in ranges over the course of the last 5 years. If we look at the percentage of move-ins, especially leasing move-ins, ranges between 15 and 19%. I don't have with me the number at the high school level and whether they were all move-ins. I would anticipate that because they hadn't been here and they were new to 9th grade, that either it was a private school situation or they did move into the school district from somewhere else.
Okay, thanks.
Other questions? Maria?
How, it seems like the NASDAQ, they're kind of off a lot, like,
Yeah, yes.
how do you, is that normal? Is it, how do you explain that?
Yeah, I'll try. The projections around the middle school, high school are usually pretty good. Like they're within 98, 99%. It is those kindergarten numbers. So you can hire a company to take a deeper dive from time to time, and we can certainly have that conversation. It is significantly more expensive, and they'll go through and they'll do more of a local analysis. There's a few companies around that are doing that. We did talk about there's another one that's sort of like NASDAQ, but they do the same exact analysis, which is just looking at trends. So they do the best they can by looking at births. They look back births 5 years ago. They look at that birth to enrollment ratio, and then try to average that out over 3 or 5 years to look to see what the number's going to be. But there are things that happen in the region and in the context and what have you that cause fluctuations. I think we did have a significant number of move-ins. That came from a variety of different areas. Many, as we talked about with the Board of Realtors, right? Mm-hmm. From Stanford, from Westchester County, from others that moved into town. And they couldn't have predicted that. NASDAQ couldn't have seen necessarily that was going to come. So it's those kindergarten numbers that are very, very tough. Once the kids are in the system, the trends seem to hold up. I mean, we talk about 20 students, and it can be disruptive in a way at the 5th, 6th, or 7th grade level. But at the same time, when you have a total of 1,300 students, if you're off by 20 or 25, you're still getting pretty close to the mark. So it's never going to be exact.
But these projections are how old? This is the report that was
We
done.
do them annually.
On
So-
NASDAQ, so they do give updated.
The problem is, I think,
Yeah.
people move into town up until, literally August, like weeks before,
We do.
right? So
Oh, yeah.
it's,
Oh, yeah, sometimes hours
yeah,
before.
exactly.
And there were more of them this past year.
Yeah.
There were more of them.
Right.
Yeah, and it does, and this is the October 1 snapshot, right? So if we were to look at these numbers today, there'd be some fluctuation even from the reports that you're looking at. And I don't know if that would be trending up or down, but it's, for instance, we have an influx of students generally right at the start of the new year. Right, when we begin in January, there's some that move around the holidays or they're planning to start the new school district at that point, and so we'll have a jump up sometimes at those, at that, January 2nd, 3rd, whenever we start. But it's an imperfect science at best. So it becomes a question of, do we want to invest more in using another company to take a deeper dive? Or do we want to try to, manage what we have and do the best we can with what we have? That's something we can talk about.
It seems like the realtors are they capture everything. I wonder if you can find out.
Well, I mentioned
renting,
before,
leases.
it was the realtors who told me that the projections were going to be wrong this year when I talked to them a year ago about the kindergarten numbers. And en masse, the whole group said, those are wrong. We're going to have a lot more kids in our system. And when I went to see them this year, I gave them credit for that because they read it. They read the tea leaves correctly. They saw it. So I speak with them annually, and so I'll keep those lines of communication open. See what we can learn from it.
It probably wouldn't hurt to just have them, if they can, systematically, collect information.
Yeah, give us some feedback. Actually, we're going
Probably
to
would
partner
help
with
in
them.
other areas too, not just us.
They've asked us to collect data for them that's a little more granular about where people are coming from. So we're going to adjust our intake paperwork so that we can capture that data and that information, those data a little bit more clearly, so that we can generate some more reports that'll be helpful for them, and in turn, they'll be able to share some information with us that will be helpful to us. So, yeah, it's a good relationship.
Great. Other questions?
Just
Penny?
as a follow-up to that one, you all were reporting to us all year long that the registrations for kindergarten were higher than our projections. So so we were expecting to see higher numbers than the projections, but was there an additional surprise over the summer? Was it even higher than we were sort of thinking?
We were seeing that. We were wondering if people were holding off on withdrawing because that's all through InfoSnap a little bit. So, or if if the numbers were truly going to confirm. I know Dr. Krenti monitors very, very closely at the elementary level all those class sizes.
So we actually did start the registration process for the kindergartners a little bit earlier this past year as well, just so that we could try to track the numbers, and they were always trending on the higher side. And it's very challenging to go back to preschools because years ago when we did go back to the preschools, we discovered that the kids will come from all over the place. And some of it goes back to where parents are working, and they may be enrolling them closer to where they're working and putting them in full daycare. So we discovered that they're not just using the preschools within New Canaan, they may be using schools outside of New Canaan in many cases, even in New York or in Stanford or Norwalk or Wilton. It stretches all over the place. So you can't even rely on the numbers that are coming in from the preschool. So I think the best that we can do is we continue to just start the process as early as possible. We usually kick it off in January with our transition to kindergarten meeting, and that really draws in a large group of people. And then we just keep advertising and trying our best to get the numbers as soon as possible.
I think my recollection was in August, we were at 80-something over projection, and we ended up at, as of now, 108. So it is higher than we expected even then.
And we do actually track those numbers through pre-registration with kindergarten. So we were probably, Brian and I are nodding, saying, we were about right. But I think it's because we have these pre-registration numbers, and then we are literally picking up the phone and calling families and saying, you've pre-registered, you haven't moved forward in the registration process. Are you still planning on coming to the New Canaan Public Schools? Oh, I just forgot. And then they register in, and those numbers come in for us. So.
Right, because the pre-registration is very easy. They go online, they fill out a form, submit, and then they're pre-registered. So sometimes people may do that without being fully committed, without having property yet, thinking about moving into town, whatever. So that's where we weren't sure if they would all materialize or not, and most of them did.
Right. Deanna?
So, thanks, Darlene, and I agree. I actually would just like to rip off this last page of the presentation, because I'm not sure I agree with the last page about the demographers' predictions. I know they're not
Yeah,
yours.
I agree.
I'm like, can we just take that out? I don't think that should be, especially, I mean, I think it's important for us as a board to understand, I mean, they were projecting a 51 student decline in K through 4 last year, and we're up 72. And they were predicting a 22 student decline in middle school, and we're up 15. The only one they were on the mark one was with the high school. That's it, and that's pretty well baked. I mean, we might get a few people coming in from private schools, but that's pretty well baked. So I agree. I think we should, with Maria, we should be spending more time with the realtors in town, because he really missed this year, and it's and not just at the elementary school. He missed at the middle school too, and that was a big miss at the middle school. But moving on,
I do think it probably to me doesn't make a whole lot of sense to go to another company to
No.
do something. To
No.
me, it's much more like locally focused. We got to talk to the realtors and figure out a way to, develop better data. But
yeah.
anyway, keep going. Sorry.
But, and totally unrelated to this now, since we've all sort of made our comment on it. But 2 questions. One, I just wanted to understand why we added preschool staff with the declining. I mean, I know you're predicting that maybe there'll be a few more coming in, but I think last year we were at 49, and with what you just said, we're at 51. I just wanted to understand the additional staff in the preschool.
So we have, I'll answer because I have the historical perspective. This is a new job, but I know that.
I figured you would.
It's unprecedented that we have 12 students in the birth to 3 pipeline.
Okay.
And we have looked into who they are, what their needs are, and we know that they'll be in our classrooms.
Yeah, they're not predictions,
They're not predictions, they're actually in a system in the state that translates over into our 3-year-old program. So we're following them, we have information on them. There's a meeting prior to their 3rd birthday to plan the program for them, and we know they're here, and we know what their disabilities are. So
Okay.
we're being proactive.
Okay.
in addition, the preschool itself does bring in
Right, Bill?
tuition.
Right.
Right, how we doing, Bill?
But the challenge, though, is we have these 12 kids in the pipeline, but they may not be here until November, December, January, February, but we need to be able to have that capacity to be able to have a space for them to go into. So, while the numbers look a little bit lower than what they may have been, as the year progresses, they'll fill in.
Okay.
And if there's 12 in the pipeline, do we look also to have 12 typicals join us?
Yeah, we always want to balance, we want at least a 50-50 mix is what the state tells us.
It's a
So we're
large
always
group
looking
of
for that,
children.
and sometimes 60-40 if we can.
So it will most likely be more than just the 12 students that join us as the year goes on, but we would open up spots for others, because I believe we have a waiting list this year?
We do. We do this year, yes. And we have people registering for next year on the waiting list for typicals, so.
Good.
Okay. And then just one totally unrelated question as well. Looking at the class size guidelines, and I see, if you look at the trend, it's definitely trending up. We're definitely getting to, more and more of our classes are getting to closer to 100% of the guidelines. And I think one thing that's I was looking at this afternoon was this middle school math sections, and I know we have issues with math placements and math leveling, but we had a number of math sections at Saks that were significantly above guidelines, and for me, that's problematic. And I'm sure the parents in those classrooms are not thrilled with that either, and I just want to understand how we're going to manage that, because when I see 28 kids in a math section, that is not New Canaan standards.
Is that in these materials somewhere?
It's in the supplement, in the green,
Sorry,
in that
a lot.
lovely green. In the lovely green, if you go to page
20, I
9, well, if you can look at page 9, has the math,
Oh,
there's,
that's the high school.
Saks.
Nine, you're looking for
I'm
seven.
looking at Saks, so page 9, and if you go back to page 8, also has some sections there as well. So it's 6th grade and 7th grade.
Oh, yeah, 29, 28, wow.
Yeah, I just, I know it's not a ton of sections, but I can tell you, if my child was in that class, I would not be thrilled.
So most likely, it's one of the advanced math
Right,
classes.
I know, and that is
And I think
always
the
our
problem
excuse.
that we run into is if you try to open up another classroom, then you're going to run 3 sections way under guidelines.
Right.
So I think it's making that call, and I think if the children qualify, they go into the class, we don't hold them out. So certainly, it is something that we do try to track very carefully. It is something that we try to get ahead of the game. And then you do have even some new move-ins that will come in that will show that they're qualified to also join that class based on some placement tests or based on their transcripts that they're bringing in as well. So, we'll continue to monitor those numbers as best as we can, but it's a
Sort of
tough
the
call to
downside.
make another class.
Yeah,
it's the
I don't
downside
love
of
that
offering-
answer. I
No,
mean,
no, but-
of being the advanced student, because it is
No, I know,
always
but
the
it's-
advanced classes
it's
that
tough
have the
because
biggest
it's
class
we
sizes.
offer all these different
Yes,
levels, and as a
yes.
result, you kind of,
Yes,
you don't
yes.
have as much flexibility with class size.
Well, and that's right, and the added complexity here
Right.
is that since we have the teaming model at the middle school, so if this were the high school, you would take these 2 classes together, make 3 classes and balance them across. But these are on different teams.
Right.
So we don't have kids going cross-team for math, so you can't do that. So you'd either have one of, 15 and one of 14, or you have one of 29. But you can't add the 2 and make a third. You have to take one and split it in half.
And I can't remember, do
Because
they
they're on
stay on their
teams.
same team all
Yes.
4 years? So maybe
No.
we need to.
Not all
No,
4
they
years.
do not stay on
But
their
for,
team for all
for
4
their
years.
academic
They
course, they
change.
do.
Just for the year then?
For
So
the year, they're on the same team
So maybe we
for their
need to look
academic
at
course.
the team like who's on what teams, and kind of really relook at placement on teams based on math placement.
I think we do, which is why you have 28 and 29. But we can certainly look at it.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
just,
You know,
I don't think
it's-
we're doing the best we can for our advanced students when we put them in those kind of classes, and I've always
It's
had a
fair.
problem
Yep.
with that.
That's fair.
Yep.
Nope.
You know.
Yeah, we will. We'll take a deeper dive into it. And that's in the
Yeah,
7th
those are
grade.
big- they're big numbers.
6 and 7,
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
both have those issues.
Yeah.
So,
Sorry,
just to follow up
Julie?
on that, so I'm just wondering, so then when they get to 8th grade, how is it that there aren't those big sections? Like, what is different? Are there kids?
It could just be the
moving around?
cohort of children. So it will vary. So one of the things that
Okay.
we'll be looking at for next year is the 7th grade moving to 8th grade, and is
Right.
there a better way to balance them across the teams?
Okay.
So
'Cause-
perhaps that was an issue in 7th grade of last year, and they were able to better balance it when 8th grade came.
Right, right.
So they would know the information better at that time. So those are the kinds of questions that we have to look at and analyze a little bit more deeply.
Right, yeah, because I would agree with Jan. I think it's really tough when, I mean, at any level, for sure.
Yep.
But those are pretty big numbers I think, for our district.
Sorry, Maria, did you have?
Yeah, I had a question. I know it's 108 new students overall, and it's 72 new in elementary, 15 at Saks, 21 New Canaan, not new, net difference. Do you track exiting students and new families? Like, how many new people are there? Say, for example, at the high school, were 21 students different? Did people leave and new families come in? Are you tracking how many have left and, who's coming in and where they're coming from? Because if they're coming from different districts, they may have different needs or different experiences. Are you tracking that by grade, exit, entering?
We do. We call it out migration and in migration. And so what you have right are the net, one
Right,
minus
this is
the
the
other.
net, so how many
we-
new people do we have, new students?
Boy, I don't have that with me. We can certainly get that to
I have
you.
it, but not by grade, so
What do
I
you
can
have?
get that.
Okay.
I have it in total,
Mhm.
in terms of where they're from and when they moved in, but I don't have it by grade. We can certainly look at that and get it.
So I just had on the math classes for the, when you have a big class and it's typically the higher level math. I love the team model for SACS and wouldn't do anything to harm that. But I don't really see what, have we considered just making an exception? Wouldn't it seem if you needed just one more, maybe it's you need a full teacher, you just really need like a 0.2 or something for one more class. And maybe we can't do that. But why couldn't you have one, if you wanted to split it into 3, have one class that was half from one team and half from the other team?
You do run into a challenge of where does it go in the schedule and who teaches that class and how that all works. But it's something we can look at.
Anyhow, just an idea. Yep.
Any other questions? So I just had a question on the class sections under guidelines. So I just note, this is page 5 of the supplementary analyses. And it looks like we're essentially, spot on for the elementary schools. And then SACS, and, very tight at the high school as well in terms of, not many classes that are under by any significant amount. And SACS is just, and I seem to remember this from last year, but I'm hoping maybe you can refresh our memory just around SACS, and maybe it's the team structure that impacts it. Why at SACS the numbers are a little bit greater in terms of class sections under guidelines by more than just a couple students.
Sorry, I was writing down your
Okay.
question so that I
All
would
right.
remember.
It was a long one. Apologies.
I honestly, I would defer to Jill on this, but I think the complexity here is probably team and schedule based.
And also music. So
Okay.
sometimes what will happen is you don't put a saxophone and a violinist together. And so that is how they get scheduled for their specials. So sometimes you will see an under or an over in a PE or one of those classes because of how they're scheduled for music based on the instrument that they're playing.
I got it.
Yeah, if you
That
look
makes
at that
sense.
page 5, that is where the majority of the classes are.
Yep.
Under the guidelines, is art, PE, health.
Yep.
Not health so much, but art, PE.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And then when you look at the world language, it will be driven by the language in which they're choosing to take.
Right.
And so sometimes we'll run into, we always give children their first choice. So we never move back to giving them a second choice. So we try our best to meet the needs. If they want to take French, then we try to figure that all out and make that all work within their schedules.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's where you'll sometimes see that fluctuation in world language.
Right.
And we
Okay.
have challenges
That makes
with teacher
sense.
certification around that.
And then you run into the teacher certification, and then you might have to have a 1.2 French teacher to cover that section.
Right. So I would just like to highlight that not only over time are we meeting the class size guidelines, i.e. not going over the guidelines, and you can see that on page 12 of the presentation. Many more classes over the last 5 years are within guidelines, but also the percentages of classes, if you sort of adjust for, some of these scheduling related challenges, which are really based on what we're trying to do for the kids, which is, provide better music education, PE, et cetera. There's a very small percentage that is under guidelines by more than a couple students. So we're really tight on what our guidelines are on both sides, which I think is a great thing. It shows how efficient we're being with our staff. It might be good for maybe next year to just to show that, just show not only those under guidelines, but also over, and just by how much, right? To show kind of how tight we are to the specific guideline numbers. Any other questions? Yeah.
I just, it's not a question, it's actually just, I think it's important that we note for the public, and as we head into budget, that, let's see, we had enrollment last year of 4113, And this year, we're at 4172, so we have, at least 60, 50 some more students than last year. And we have only now I'm going too many pieces of paper today. I
There's a
have
lot.
paper all over. But our FTEs are only up 1.85. So I think, the dialogue is always, our staffing, why can't you cut? And I'm like, we have a significant increase in our population, and we have modestly increased staff to meet that increased need. So I think, that needs to be
It's
really.
economies of scale.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Very.
Well, and
My
I
favorite
do want to
word.
credit both Dr. Carenti and Ms. Bianca for that too, because really if you look granularly at the elementary class sizes, you'll see that just about all of them are in the upper end of the range. So you're looking at 17 and a half or up in just about all of those. And that's because they're looking at it daily, a couple times a week. They're meeting with the elementary principals, holding off on hiring the additional staff until it's very, very clear that we're going to need them. And it's sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't, and other things happen. But this year we really it worked out in that we were able to keep those elementary class size really, for the most part, at that upper end of the range, and that helps. There's some that could have been split had we made the decision in early July instead of waiting until early August to make those decisions. But we didn't. We kept looking at it and looking at it. So that's really credit to both Jill and Darlene. Because those principals would love to go ahead and get the hiring done. But we hold off and do what we can to try to manage those costs, because we know how valuable every dollar is.
It's really good discipline, for sure.
Yep.
Any other questions?
Because
All right.
my brief addition would simply be, these documents here, the staff utilization report for non-certified and certified, there's treasure trove of data in here.
Yeah.
So we consider them foundational documents for our district. So we'll be talking about and using these documents all throughout our budget process as we go. We look at the projections certainly, but this is certainly a labor. I don't know how much love there is, but certainly a labor in
Not
order
yet.
to
Maybe next year.
coordinate all of this. But it really breaks down, there's thousands of sections that happen across our district in all of our K-12 levels and things. And it really shows where the kids are, what the teachers are doing, where the staffing is. And there's also, it continues to evolve, right? So as the alternative program comes online, where those teachers are accounted for and how that works, and the color coding and everything else. They're highly detailed, very specific, and we'll be using them and talking about them right through until the budget's finalized probably in June. So, thank you.
Tiana has one more
Sorry,
question.
I actually just have a question, because when do we get the demographers' projections, the big, because I didn't see.
So you have them in the memo.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
You know what? We just got the memo tonight, so I didn't see that. Sorry. It's in the back of it.
So
The-
let's see.
Sorry.
At the end, I think.
Page 3 of the memo, you have it by elementary school.
I'm meaning the chart.
The actual
That
chart
big
itself.
That's what I mean, is the big
Yeah, that
chart.
Do we
has
have
the-
the chart?
No,
or-
not in the memo.
Okay.
Sorry.
So in the past, it had been included with the memo, so
Yes.
this was the cover page
Yep.
to the demographer's report, so we'll get it out to everybody.
Perfect. Thank you.
Sure. Yeah, it's the
Okay.
green and the white,
Thank you, Darlene.
NASDAQ heading.
Right.
and that. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Very good.
Okay,
If it's easy, when we get that report, I'd love to know what the multiplier is. I can go
sure.
and calculate it, but I'm being lazy. That they're using for kindergarten each year. Because we've been off before, and I don't even think you can blame the demographer, because the demographer can't say, oh, well, all of a sudden this year I'm going to use a much higher, multiplier than was appropriate for the last 3 years. So I just think there's a little inaccuracy inherent in the whole process. Would be just curious to see what the multiplier is that they're using.
And then there's actually a page on that, right in the,
Okay,
right
in the back,
handout, so we
okay.
can give that right to you.
That'd be great.
Because you're right, it's that gap between the number of births and then 5 years later, what the enrollment is. And it's always higher, that has always been for us, so it's going to be a 1 point something. And in our bigger years, it's like a 1.4 number, a 1.5 number. But in our smaller years, it's been a 1.2 or so. So it's that fluctuation, and that's the prediction they try to make. And it's really just based on historical data as they look at it. So
Which
we
thought-
looked at
yeah.
next year's projections for kindergarten and thought, gosh, that looks low given where we are now and what we're doing. But simply it's going back 3 and then 5 years and looking at the trends and calculating the number and putting it in place. So yeah, so there's a page
Then
on
if
that.
you
we can talk
overlay,
about that.
you know, the in-migration trends, right? People buying home, young families buying homes, maybe because some home prices have come down. I mean, that could totally change the game, right?
Well, and when they're doing the projections, they do not take into account projects that are in the works. So if you have a new complex being built, and it's scheduled to come online at a certain time, say a year and a half out, 2 years out, with X number of units, they don't include those in their projections because they used to do it, but then something can happen, they don't come online, the permits don't come through, other things, and then the projections are off. So they really use known data and known housing and what have you. They don't look at the pipeline for housing, so to speak.
Brian, can we back answer a question? Jill just mentioned that Brendan's question about the class sections over guidelines is in the staff utilization report on page 4. So all that information is there.
The supplementary?
Yeah. It's supplementary analysis.
Okay.
Thank you.
Oh, I see.
Over and
Perfect. Over and under. Yeah, so this, I mean, the percentage over is tiny. You know, if you go to, I mean, I really look at the greater than 2 over and under. It's 0.86% over by greater than 2 students for the entire district. But it's math.
Yeah.
In grade 6 and 7.
Yeah.
And then if you go to the same number, I guess, to me, it would be good to just dig in a little bit more on the under guidelines by greater than 2, because there's just got to be something. We know what it is, it's just, I
Yeah,
can't
the
tell
majority
what the
of those.
numbers. Yeah,
Those
it's,
aren't in PE or 90 of them.
right.
90 out of
exactly.
147.
Right. So it's a small, you get to a really small number. What is that? It's probably 5% or thereabouts, if you adjust for sax, music related. So you're talking about a 6% swing between those that are over and under guidelines by more than 2 students, which is a really tight number.
Yeah. Very careful
All right.
management.
Thank you.
It's very important.
Great first report,
Sorry,
Darlene.
Maria has one more.
I just want to add, what did you call it, a migration report?
It's in migration.
In
and
migration, out migration. I mean, looking at that over time might help fix the flaw of the birth rate factor. You know, if you might be able to see that we're not even dealing with the same population 5 years out. And I just, when I worked at St. Aloysius, we would talk to the kindergarten teachers to find out who had siblings. That's how we knew what the next class was. So it might be worth just, putting it out there to find out what they know.
Yeah, and we're going to we'll try to get more granular detail in our enrollment when the kindergarten families do enroll.
And when we do the registration, Maria, it is a piece that we just recently added for them to list all the siblings and their ages. So it's a different way for us to track who might have that child that hasn't started kindergarten yet. And then as far as the withdrawals, we do track that number very carefully. We could go back to, say, June of last year, this was how many families that withdrew versus 2019, how many families that withdrew, and then we do track them over time. And we do send a survey to ask if they've left our school system to go to a private school or if they've left to go to another town or out of state. Some families complete it and some don't. But we do try to track it and watch those numbers very carefully. And actually, we send out reminders to people when we do our data verification. It's a place for them to click right there to say, I'm not returning next year. And that allows us to keep track of that number before they even fill out the enrollment paperwork.
Do you see any trends? Are people leaving the state like we keep hearing? Or
I would have to go back and look at those numbers really
Yeah.
carefully to see where they're tracking to. but it's not like I would say we're seeing this one trend over time. Everybody seems to be moving to North Carolina or anything of that nature, so.
Yeah, nothing really jumped out in that one. One thing that I thought was interesting was we have some of the in-migration from Europe. And turned out there was a company nearby that had a family from, do you remember?
Norway.
Norway. And he was working here, and more people from Norway were coming, and the family was telling their friends back in Norway how great New Canaan was. And so a few families moved into New Canaan from Norway to work in the same company, and it just getting around word of mouth. So we have a good reputation there too.
All over.
Yeah.
Truly world-class.
It was truly.
All right. We good? All right.
That's great.
All right, up next is our action items. First are the 2020-2021 budget assumptions for a second read. Any discussion? Comments, questions?
Just share that you have right there in front of you the copy from our last meeting with our first reading, changes in red. Again, the budget assumptions and related priorities sort of become another foundational document as we build our budget. It helps us to ensure that our resources and our resource requests are aligned with our district goals, and are forward-focused by nature. It also helps ensure that we continue to resource the processes and systems and things that we currently have in place. So it's a way to make sure that we maintain our focus on our priorities as we continue to move forward.
So I just have one suggested change, which would just be, since we're going to be evaluating start times, to just have built into this what the resource plan would be associated with that alternative, whatever alternative we're going to end up evaluating, because we kind of need numbers to go along with it. So I would add that. I think it would go in 1B. We have something in here right now just around school, or in 4 school, or 1B4 school organization, scheduling, school start and end times, library learning commons, et cetera. And I just think we need something that, would say something along the lines of developing a resource plan, including transportation in support of, our decisions later this year with regard to school start and end times.
Okay?
Does that make sense? Any?
It does. The one before is about doing the research and looking into things and discussing. So you're saying,
Oh, C.
It's,
C, it's under C, isn't it, not B?
I think the number is
It's
a
under
little.
B, it's B4. It's on
B4.
page
On
2,
page two.
B4,
Oh.
right here.
You know,
No,
whatever
I think it's-
downloaded
There's a
has
mistake
C.
in the numbering.
Yeah, because on what I downloaded from our Fridays is a C, but
oh,
you're
yeah.
right.
You know what? You're right. It is C.
Sorry,
There are 2
I-
Bs.
Oh, yeah, it is.
But
It's
what
the
we got in
second
our
B.
Friday nights is correct.
okay, good.
Because it was a C.
So it's C.
Okay.
Oh, wait, sorry.
C4.
I was like, what?
Yeah.
B, that's not
Oh,
what
you're
I
right.
thought.
There are 2 Bs.
On page
Okay.
2.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sometimes that happens when you do
You
the
had it right to
redlining.
begin with, yeah.
Yeah. It does. It's okay.
Okay.
Yeah, so it would come after 1C4. It would say something along the lines of, developing a clear and comprehensive resource plan, including transportation needs in support of the Board of Ed's upcoming decisions regarding school start and end times.
Okay.
Is that,
That makes sense, because it is something
we need to.
we have to do.
I
It has to be
agree. I
accounted
think
for.
I think it's good. I think it's exactly what we've been telling people we would do, and it cements it. So I'm in favor of that change.
Okay.
Any other comments or questions on it? Maria?
On that C3,
Mm-hmm.
is that something that has to happen? It says investing in professional learning prior to implementing a significant change. That sounded to me like it would be something that might hold up the late start time. Or
This
it would,
isn't late start times, I don't think. I think this is a
That one
block
was
schedule.
specifically about a
Block scheduling.
scheduling change at the high school. So talking about, say, if a block scheduling change were to be made, for instance, that we'd want to make sure that resources are put towards the professional learning required to train the staff to to work in that way. Was
Significant change in the teaching, I mean.
In the
that-
teaching and learning
The later
experience.
start is also a significant change, so maybe it just wasn't clear to me.
sure.
Maybe we should just say, implementing a significant change to the school day schedule.
Well,
Is that?
Un-
I think, no,
It's
it's the other
basic-
way around. We're talking
Yeah.
about, it's not the schedule, it's not, oh, well, I guess.
I mean.
No, so we were
Well,
trying
later
to
Within the
start
day.
capture
No, I don't mean start and end times, I mean
Yeah,
the
so
school
maybe that's,
day.
The
yeah,
master
that would make it
schedule,
less,
right.
more confusing. I
So
think.
I was trying to capture, so I was, the thinking, for what it's worth, and I may be wrong in this, my thinking was that if we shift the school start times, that in itself is, but leave everything else alone, that's really not a significant change in the teaching and learning experience,
Yeah.
for kids. They're just gonna do it later in the day. But if we actually change the master schedule to go from 7 periods a day to a block, or do something at SACs that changes the structure of their day, or even change the rotation element, something that changes that experience for kids in the class, then that would be where we'd want, so I don't think we would need any professional development around changing a school start time if the master schedule stayed the same.
I guess I thought that block scheduling change would be to accommodate the late start, because it would save time, right? There'd be less transit. I thought that was part of a solution.
It's
that-
part of a solution around student wellness and health. It is, because of the number of transitions in the day and kind of the level of stress and all of that. But to do that successfully, you really do need to invest in helping teachers understand how best to deliver instruction in a block. And you want to make sure that, your students and families they understand how the experience will change. So that, I was trying to be pretty specific in that assumption, but it was not meant to be related to school start times. So I want to make sure that's clear for everybody.
Patty?
So why don't we just add to that C3 Roman numerals, the two words at the very beginning that says, when appropriate, investing in professional learning prior to implementing a significant change in the teaching and learning experience. Because we wouldn't need
Yeah.
it for the school start times, but we would need
Sure.
it
That's a
for
good
the
qualifier.
master.
There you go.
Yeah.
A lawyer always
I
is
love
good
that.
at qualifying.
Love that.
Well, yeah, because then it's not open to interpretation, right? So again, I don't see a significant change in the teaching and learning experience happening as a result of changing school start times. I do see it happening as a result of changing the master schedule. But now it doesn't matter how I see it, because then it'll be when it's appropriate we do that.
So this sort of presumes that change may be coming, a master schedule change, a block scheduling.
There's quite a bit of work being done, research right now on that. I don't want to get ahead of it, but if it were to come, then I think as a board and district, we want to make sure that significant professional learning happened before the change was made. And so this helps us in that regard. I know there are teams from the high school that have gone out and are continuing to go out to visit other schools and to speak with teachers and students and parents and others who are in an environment now with a modified schedule, whether a block or a rotating different types of schedules. So they're doing the research now. And I expect them to give us an update relatively soon.
So this is actually the kind of thing I think you would have a board subcommittee on scheduling, because that's a pretty big change. I mean, it changes everything about a student's day.
Right,
Is that
changes that
some-
teaching and learning experience. So the master schedule itself, again, the teachers have been working on it and doing some visits and things guided by the principal, the administration. I know they're starting to bring a couple of parents into the conversation through the PFA. I think what they'll be doing is bringing their feedback and research and information and sort of recommendations forward to the board in the future. And that's been the plan, sort of from kind of those types of initiatives have been best from the ground up. Where sort of the teachers and the students and others are kind of looking at different options and making those changes. Something like school start time, the bounds, the start and end times of the day, those rest squarely with the decision-making of the board.
But, to Maria's point, putting aside the committee point, I think it's definitely something we want to hear a lot about prior to making any sort of a decision.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Well, I think at least have a board member involved in the meetings, because it is a huge, there'll be, I'm sure, financial implications. making families aware of any kind of change, staffing maybe needs.
Yeah.
Yep, great.
So
Any other?
I just say, I think the board's behind the effort. If you need more input from us, we're excited about it. I was talking to a teacher who used to teach at New Canaan, who's teaching at Fairfield now, and has the master schedule, and says she would never want to go back.
That's one of the sites we visited.
And just was talking about a lot of the pluses. And she did say, she said, you know, before you do it, you have to have professional learning. So I think this is really good to have in here.
And I think you do need the feedback. I know, actually, my daughter mentioned someone at Norwalk. I think Brian McMahon. Do they have block scheduling?
I'm not
A
sure.
friend of hers who's in block scheduling, and it was hard for her. It was a long period of time. So you really do need to get feedback on how it'll look.
Yep.
Great.
Any other questions, comments? Okay, so are people okay with that additional change, just around getting the resourcing, sort of update on a potential school start time change as well?
And then the one appropriate.
Okay.
Good.
All right, great.
Do we have to have a
There's a
motion?
few
Yes,
I think we have to have a
yeah.
formal motion.
Yeah. So,
There's a few other, A has 2 sub 1, 2, 3. The numbering's off.
okay.
Someone's
Yeah,
got
yeah.
I'll
I
fix
think,
all of
I
that.
think it's
I'll
okay
fix
on
all
what we
of
got on Friday. It's not okay what we got.
Right, that's what I noticed. 'cause I
Yeah,
just
what
a
we got
weird-
in our,
it's probably
what
a
was
weird
distributed looks
Word
fine.
thing, yeah.
On our Friday.
Electronically.
Electronically, because
I'll make sure that all
yeah.
of the numbering and the pagination and all that is
Right.
correct.
Yeah.
I will take care of all that.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Yeah, so something
Okay.
happened.
Okay.
Yeah, that's, my
Um,
apologies for the.
No, that's okay.
So we have those 2 changes.
I'll make a
Anyone
motion
like-
to approve those changes.
Okay. Second, Penny? All those in favor?
Wait, are we voting on the whole thing?
No, just the
Just those
additions.
changes?
Those changes.
And we
Those
can
2
vote on the whole
changes.
thing.
I'm confused as to which, yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
I agree.
All right, all those in favor? Great. Unanimous. Okay, and now we're going to vote on the entire goals, budget assumptions, and related priorities. Can I have a motion?
I think we've moved
I
it.
think we
second.
already
Oh,
moved
sorry,
it.
we already did. So we just need a vote. All those in favor? Maria?
I'm going to abstain because I feel like there's too much in here that I have questions on.
This is
So-
mostly the same from last year. There's just a few minor
Well,
additions.
Well, to be honest,
I mean,
you know,
literally, if
bringing
you look
in-
at the red, there's very few additions from last year.
I don't want to say no, because there's certain things I totally agree with, but there's certain things, taking a direction in certain ways. This seems to define and drive the budget. So I'm not sure, like, looking at a master schedule, I just don't know that that's where I can support the budget direction going. But there are other things I do agree with, so I don't want to, I'll just abstain. I think there's just too
Okay.
much too much in here, and I still have questions about things.
Okay.
So
Okay.
I would prefer to see them kind of prioritized. It feels like a mixture of concepts and some specifics, so.
Okay.
Well, and I'd be glad to
Right.
talk together another time, Maria, if it'd be helpful. Sure.
Okay.
Okay, so I guess we already voted, and Maria's abstaining, and everyone else is in favor. Okay, thank you. Okay, next up is our new policy. It's BOE Policy 7557, which is for naming of New Canaan Public School facilities, for a second read. Any comments, Dr.
Is
Lutz?
it 51 or 57?
7551.
51.
7551, sorry.
No, that's,
Yeah.
the agenda should say 7551. It's got the name right there, naming of New Canaan Public School facilities. I just would say that the one to refer to is, it says in the introduction, the Board of Ed is responsible for the care, maintenance, and operation of buildings, lands, apparatus, and other property used for school purposes. As we discussed earlier, this is intended to provide a process for folks who may be interested in naming any of the property here. It's We brought it forward last week in conjunction with the NCAF agreement that we hope to have signed by the end of the week, where just for the community members and board and others to understand the appropriate process to follow in the event that something this were to occur. Yeah, so I guess I'm open to any questions from here. As it says in the policy, if there's an appropriate committee for such a request to go to, it would start at committee. If not, it could go to, the board as a committee of the whole. So, and again, it's just meant to very clearly lay out how that process works. And as it says in here, similar to new policies, there's a first reading and a second reading, so that there is an opportunity for public and community feedback as well, prior to making a decision by the board.
Seems to me, I mean, this is more of a question, just a quick question, that, for initially, this would be the board making a decision as it relates to any naming. If it were to be a situation, years down the road where we're naming, classrooms here and there, and I mean, then that's a scenario in which I think maybe we'd create a committee, and, but it doesn't seem to me that we would need to do that now, to specify that, it goes to the governance committee or, some other entity.
Right, I think that's right.
Okay. Deanna?
So I just have a question and have a thought on item 3, general criteria. The language says, facility naming shall be considered in cases when it's been recommended to honor a person or organization providing exemplary services or contributions to and having an affiliation with New Canaan Public Schools. I might want to just say and/or, because that affiliation, I can envision a scenario where there is someone in the community that wants to make a significant donation and doesn't have any children or grandchildren, or, it's just a community member that may want to make a donation, and the affiliation wording may be a little bit, depending on the board that you have, they may get stuck on that and. So that would just be a nice suggestion.
And we could make that change. I could, and you're right, it would depend upon the board and what you have. I think you
Right.
could argue in that instance that the affiliation is a taxpayer who lives in town
Right.
and is,
Yep.
Yeah.
benefits from the quality of the public schools or what have you. If you had somebody who was living in Darien wanting to make a significant
Yeah.
investment, then maybe they go to the Turkey Bowl every year. I don't know. It depends on how strong you want to push
Right.
that. But let's see, so it would be, or organization providing exemplary services or contribution. And
Can you just take out the words "and having an affiliation"? So it's just when it's been recommended to honor a person or organization providing exemplary services or contributions
Yeah,
to the New Canaan Public
Yeah,
Schools?
I think that's
Yeah,
a good change.
okay.
Yeah.
okay.
I mean, and ultimately, it's important to remember that the policy is designed to, the Board of Education is the decider.
Right.
So this is like an eligibility criteria. So for it to be more general, doesn't change.
You can always say no.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Right.
Okay, so we'll strike "and having an affiliation with" the New Canaan Public Schools, okay?
Was that to, let me just, I guess as a board, we would just, say no. Was that intentionally put in there because for corporate, we don't allow corporate sponsorship of facilities? Is that why that affiliation word was put in there?
I think that's a part of it. Also, you could have historical figures or others that people want to name things after that maybe aren't connected at all with the New Canaan Public. There's no affiliation there. But
Could you just run it by, we're voting, I guess. I'm not a lawyer, so I don't know.
Yeah,
I'm
I
not a
think that's a
lawyer.
good, I
I
think
think
that's a good point.
I'm
I
like, I'm
actually
not a
like,
lawyer.
I'm going back now, and I feel like I like your initial proposal, which is keeping it in and just saying and/or.
so and/or would be, or would mean you could only have an affiliation with the New Canaan
Right,
Public
or
Schools.
doesn't make sense.
But not
Yeah, that's
who has
true.
provided
That's true.
exemplary
Yeah.
service or contributions.
But no, or wouldn't or say, you could have exemplary services, contributions, or, it could be any one
Or.
of those three things, and/or.
It would mean, well, or it would say that you could not have the first, but you could have the second, right? So
Right.
you could do, it could be somebody with an affiliation with New Canaan Public Schools, but it doesn't require them to have provided exemplary services or contributions.
Right.
That's true.
And
But I
vice
mean, why
vice
would we
versa
allow it?
would work too, right? So that doesn't, I don't know.
The, again, it's a general criteria. I think that, again, when we create policies, if problems arise, there's always a mechanism to adjust and adapt and revise. But
Yeah, I'm
Leave it to
fine
the
with the
board.
change, just because the board is going to have to approve
Right.
any naming going
Well-
forward.
Dr. Letsy's point, you can change the policy before you vote.
Yeah.
So
and
you're
I
not
was-
restricted by the policy. You can always change the policy,
Right.
if you're all in agreement.
And I think even if you leave the "and" in there, when you go down to the specific criteria, I mean, it does in both 1 and 2 mention, or at least in number 1, enhancing the experience of New Canaan
Yeah,
Public Schools. So
that's a
you
good point.
do get that.
Yep,
Okay.
yep.
Okay.
yeah, it's a very big deal to name something after something.
Yep.
There should be a relatively high bar, I think, going into something like this, because it's a significant honor.
It's a big deal, yep.
Mhm.
Maria?
It is a big deal, and I was thinking, we say recommended to the Board of Ed for consideration. Should we be more specific and say for a vote? I mean, I'm more
Sure,
concerned
where are
about
you,
the.
Maria? I'm sorry, just
Well,
which page?
for both of them, Section 5, naming of facilities, the last sentence says, should be recommended to the Board of Ed for consideration. And we say the same thing for renaming, that it's only for consideration. I feel like the board should actually vote, especially if you're thinking about renaming something. You really,
It might be in section 6 that it deals with it, because it talks about our procedure.
Yeah, two
I
public
see the
meetings.
point that you're raising. It's not just, it's
Consideration.
not for our consideration, it's for our decision.
exactly.
And I'm wondering if section 6, if we read down to that, takes care of that concern.
So it's that first sentence of the second paragraph in
Oh, there's
6,
an
if the
act.
board acts favorably upon
Yeah.
the recommendation.
Yeah.
So it
Okay,
does
so it's
require the
built
board to
in.
take affirmative action.
Yeah.
So is that the same statement then should be under the renaming?
Yes. Yep, it is in the third paragraph, in case of renaming or naming of units, if approved by the Board of
Okay.
Education. Yeah, it does require affirmative action. Good. We have to really make sure of that.
Okay.
So-
Penny?
So, I mean, I suppose when we consider such a request, I know that Harvard, and of course, we want to compare ourselves favorably to Harvard, I think it's Harvard, will only name a building for a certain number of years. I don't think we have to add that right now, but it might be something, where, because I know there have been cases where after 30 years, I mean, we're going to keep going as a school district. So I don't know if we would want to put a time limit
How long has
on-
sex been sex?
Right.
I just,
A long time.
A long
Yeah.
time, right. Longer than 30 years.
It is it's just I mean, I hope maybe it's an issue, we'll have so many opportunities and we'll have such commitment that we can consider it at a later date.
I think that is something that we should consider, and I feel like if we limit the time, we're suggesting we're doing it for the purposes of raising money. And that shouldn't really be the reason we're doing it, necessarily. So,
Okay.
And we also, retain the ability to rename facilities, right?
Right.
So in 30 years, we'll have a conversation. And see where we are. That's a good point. But yeah, the renaming is in there for that, I think partially at least that reason. right, That it's,
Yeah.
there's a mechanism.
Right.
To review.
Okay, can I have a motion to make the change that was suggested, which is to remove "and having an affiliation with" in section 3?
Thought we were gonna leave
So
it.
Penny? Second?
I'm
Sorry.
confused. I thought we were leaving it in based on the discussion.
No, I think we were removing it because we have the, at least Julie said, we have the protections that are
Okay.
in 4, plus we
Okay.
also have the ability to vote on
Okay.
each naming opportunity. Do I have a second? Julie? All those in favor of the change? Okay, unanimous. And on approval of the new policy, do I have a motion? We have a motion, sorry. All those in favor? All right, great, thank you. All right, next is the New Canaan High School graduation date. Dr. Lutzy.
Yes, I'm very excited to do this. In the past, and for my whole career at least, it had always, the state required us to wait until April 1st to set a graduation date because they figured by that time, most of the bad weather in the winter and others would be over. A colleague upstate, up in Ellington, I believe, brought forward to Hartford, to the legislators, the need to establish the graduation date earlier than that. And they were responsive to that request in that so many of our districts now are doing creative things with seniors, like internships, other things. They are often waiting to go to jobs and camps and others where they can make some money prior to college, where sometimes they have school orientations and other experiences waiting for them, and to have the graduation date a moving target just didn't seem right for families and really for the students to be able to plan. So now as a board, we're able to set the date as long as it is no earlier than the 180th day of school as established by the Board of Ed calendar. So I spoke with Mr. Principal Egan, we looked at the calendar and identified Monday, June 15th as the best graduation date, which is the 180th day of school. And then we have Tuesday, June 16th as the makeup date, if we need to use that. Now, with this new law, once we establish the date, regardless of any snow days or closings or cancellations, that date is firm and doesn't have to move or adjust. So if we lost, something happened, we had to close for 2 weeks, the rest, the 9 through 12, really K through 11 would be in school 2 weeks past our actual graduation date, and this would stay firm, and that's when seniors are done. So I think it's a good move by Connecticut to be responsive to the needs of our seniors who are really at a different place in their lives. They're waiting to get started on whatever they're doing next, whether it's the workplace, the military, the going to college, whatever they're doing. So as a board, we're able to set that date and make it firm. So we figured with some possible snow around the corner on Thursday night that I'm hearing a little bit about, that our timing is good to get this in the books.
Let's lock it down.
And because if not, you have to keep moving it to the 180th day. So this is kind of the sooner the better.
Great. Deanna?
So I'm totally in favor of the date and all that. I just actually, when I looked at the date, we actually have a Board of Education meeting scheduled on that date.
We do.
So what would we do with the Board of Ed meeting?
We can have that conversation later about moving it or, we could reschedule it or,
We usually have, it's an important meeting, so.
Because those June meetings really
Yeah,
are, because the
they
first
are.
meeting in June are we honor our retirees,
Yeah.
and the second, if we haven't already, we can
Yeah.
look at the budget for the following year. So we'd probably move it. And
Okay.
that we could, as a board, we could talk about, see, is it better to move it to later in the week or the week before or the week after?
Okay, that was my only concern.
Makes sense.
If you recall, this year, we had problems as well with our Board of Ed meeting because we had so many board members with graduating seniors.
Yeah, yeah.
I
Right.
believe we canceled that meeting
Yeah.
on the Monday night. Yeah, I think we had to. Yeah, so, yep. But as they all are, it's an important meeting.
That one, that one actually is an important.
They all
really
are.
important.
Yeah. Okay. Can I have a motion to approve the date? Maria, second? Deanna, all those in favor? Great, thanks.
Can I just add something too? I think it's a great idea to have a Monday. I know people wanted the weekend.
Yes.
So that's perfect. And what happened last time, my son's orientation was after graduation, so I started driving at like 10 o'clock at night after having dinner. So, and because the date kept changing, it was hard to pick the orientation. So I think that's a great date. Good job.
Good, thank you, thank you. Well, and we did have that discussion about the weekend and felt that
Yeah.
Monday was great for people to travel in and be able to, and even knowing the date and the rain date if we were to need it, so good. Good. Thank you.
Okay, next, comments from the public. Anyone? No. Okay,
You
thanks.
just need to acknowledge Thomas stayed here for the whole meeting. Mr. Butterworth is a
Diehard.
great
Diehard.
representative for the Board of Ed.
Absolutely.
Before we go to announcements and future business, tonight is the last meeting for Maria and Tom, so we'd like to thank you both for your service over the last 4 years. Tom, you've been great on the governance committee and leading that, and really being diligent and moving our policy revisions forward. So appreciate that. And Maria, I think you've just been incredibly passionate about many different things, which is appreciated. You've tested us, I think, in a bunch of different areas to think about things in a bunch of different ways, and we all definitely appreciate that and appreciate all your experience within education, which many of us don't have. So thank you.
Thank you.
Any other
Thank you.
comments or? No? Okay. We have.
I'll just echo and just say thank you both. This is, it's a team effort. And when people ask about what it's like to be, in New Canaan, I say, well, I get to work with the A-team, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to serve such a talented and sort of dedicated and skilled board. And we're going to miss you, both of you,
Thank
very
you.
much.
By the way, it could be my last meeting too. So
No.
Stop it.
we'll see what
Stop it.
happens. In
Yeah.
that case, I'll come back crying
No.
to everybody and give
Yeah.
you all hugs.
Well, I did want to say to Tom, because, I guess I worked on a pretty, extensive committee with him. The governance committee was a lot of work, and he
Huge
did
amount
an
of work.
amazing job, really keeping that effort moving forward, and we made a lot of progress in his tenure, so thank you, and great insight, and so thank you
Thank
for
you. It was a
your
pleasure.
leadership on that.
Yeah, you don't want to consider like an ad hoc assignment. No, thank you for all that, and both of you, it's been such a pleasure.
Well, I have to say thank you, too. Everyone's been very gracious, no matter what my point of view was. It's been a privilege, and I remember my first Board of Ed meeting, I felt like I was in a graduate course for education. It was very instructional, so thank you. I'll be around.
Yeah, exactly. I'll be around as well. I started my engagement with the public school system in New Canaan in 1970, so I don't expect it'll end anytime soon. Thank you.
Good.
You get the longevity award. If you want to meet the rest of the criteria, I think you're good for 4.
I'll get my check.
That's good.
Oh, that's great.
All right. Next are announcements and future business.
Well, sure. So
Sort of lost track of that.
we did. So next meeting will begin with our organizational meeting, which we have annually as a board. We'll invite our town clerk for the swearing in of new members and go into that. And then afterwards, we have a statement of accounts and updates on a few other things that are happening. So I guess the most important thing is to remind people to get out and vote tomorrow. Because we're very fortunate to live in a democracy where everyone has a voice, and we need to take advantage of that and use our voices to vote. So I do hope that everyone gets out. Our schools are closed tomorrow to facilitate the voting. So let's make it worthwhile and get 100% out there.
Agreed. All right. Can I have a motion to adjourn? Penny? Second? Tom? All those in favor? Thanks.
Great. Thank you all.
Excellent.